He laughed at a hero's limp. Then Stallone stood up and silenced the room. Welcome to Stallone Unleashed. Let's uncover what really happened. What started as a routine, highly anticipated appearance on late-night television would, in the span of less than 15 minutes, become an indelible cultural moment, a flashpoint of character that would be dissected, debated, and ultimately revered for years to come. The stage was set at Late Night Live with Jax Ryder, the undisputed king of its time slot, a show that thrived on its host's razor-sharp wit and a carefully curated atmosphere of cool, insider irreverence. The studio, a historic New York theater, hummed with the electric energy of a live audience, a palpable buzz that always preceded Ryder's entrance. On this particular evening, the green room was a study in contrasts. The headlining guest was Sylvester Stallone, an icon whose career had spanned decades, evolving from a symbol of raw cinematic power to a respected actor, writer, and elder statesman of Hollywood. He sat calmly, a figure of quiet confidence, dressed in a sharp, understated suit, exuding an aura of earned comfort in his own skin. He was there to discuss his latest directorial project, a thoughtful drama that was already garnering critical acclaim. In another corner, a world away in demeanor and philosophy, was Logan Vex Vance. At 22, Logan was a supernova of the digital age, a social media influencer whose brand was built on a volatile cocktail of audacious stunts, cutting-edge fashion, and a public persona of unassailable arrogance. He was famous for being famous, a master of viral moments who treated the world as his personal content farm. His presence on the show was a calculated nod to the younger demographic, a bridge between old media and new. The third guest, the linchpin of the night's impending drama, was Sergeant Major Thomas Mack McDonald, a decorated war hero, recently retired after 3 decades of service. Mack was the opposite of Logan in every conceivable way. He was unassuming, his face a roadmap of quiet dignity and experience, his posture straight despite a noticeable limp, a permanent souvenir from a firefight in a place most of the audience couldn't find on a map. He was there representing a national charity for wounded veterans, a cause Stallone had personally championed. As the show began, the initial interactions unfolded exactly as planned. Jax Ryder, a master of his craft, navigated the opening monologue with his signature blend of charm and sardonic commentary. The first segment with Stallone was warm and engaging, filled with anecdotes about filmmaking and shared laughter. The audience was relaxed, enjoying the familiar rhythm of the show. When Jax introduced the other guests after the first commercial break, the pieces were all in place. The lion, the jackal, and the stoic soldier, all seated on one plush sofa under the hot, unforgiving glare of the studio lights. The calm, as it so often does, was merely a prelude to the storm. The shift, when it came, was subtle at first, a faint tremor beneath the surface of the polished broadcast. Jax Ryder, ever the orchestrator, turned his attention to Sergeant Major McDonald, his tone shifting from jocular to respectfully somber. "Sergeant," he began, leaning forward with practiced sincerity, "thank you for your service. Tell us about the incredible work the Veterans First Foundation is doing." Mack, unused to the spotlight, answered with humility and directness. He spoke not of battles or glory, but of the quiet struggles of soldiers returning home, the need for mental health support, job training, and a sense of community. As he spoke about the physical toll of his decades in service, a toll he wore with quiet pride, he gestured briefly towards his leg. "Many of us come back with reminders," he said, his voice even. "They're part of our story. This limp," he added with a wry, self-effacing smile, "just means I'm a little slower getting to the bar, that's all." A wave of warm, appreciative laughter rippled through the audience. But on the couch, Logan Vance, who had been slouched in his seat, scrolling through his phone during the pre-show rundown, let out a soft but distinctly audible scoff. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated derision, a tiny puncture in the balloon of respect that had filled the studio. He didn't look up, but a smirk played on his lips. It was a fleeting moment, one that the cameras might have missed were they not trained on the guest couch. But Sylvester Stallone, seated between the influencer and the soldier, did not miss it. His easygoing smile didn't vanish, but it tightened at the edges. His eyes, which had been crinkled in amusement, sharpened with a sudden, analytical focus. He shifted slightly in his seat, a minute adjustment of his large frame, turning his body ever so slightly more towards Logan. The narrator of the evening's drama, had there been one, would have noted this as the inciting incident. The precise moment the tectonic plates of ego and integrity began to grind against each other. The air in the studio, once light and effervescent, suddenly grew heavier, charged with an unspoken question. The audience felt it too. A few scattered coughs and shuffles betrayed a nascent unease. The calm was broken, and the storm was now gathering speed. The jovial mask of late-night television was beginning to crack. Jax Ryder, with the instincts of a predator who smells blood in the water, saw the flicker of conflict and knew it was gold for his ratings-driven world. His show wasn't just about celebrity interviews. It was about creating moments, and a moment was brewing. Instead of steering the conversation back to safer waters, he leaned into the skid. "Logan, you seem to have thought on that." Jax prodded, a glint in his eye. He was tossing a match into a puddle of gasoline, and he knew it. Logan Vance looked up from his phone, his expression one of theatrical boredom. He relished the attention. "A thought? I don't know," he began, his voice dripping with condescension. "I was just thinking about performance. In my world, it's all about optimization, peak physical condition. We celebrate strength, speed, aesthetics. If you're not at 100%, you're out. It's evolution, right?" He gestured vaguely at Sergeant McDonald, the smirk now fully formed and directed. "No offense, but we're talking about damage. It's a different philosophy." The sergeant, a man who had faced down threats far more significant than a preening child, attempted to respond with the grace he had learned over a lifetime of discipline. "The damage, as you call it, son, is sometimes the price of protecting the very things that allow you to perform." The audience murmured its approval, but Logan was undeterred, emboldened by the spotlight. He saw this not as a dialogue, but as a chance to reinforce his brand of provocative disruption. "Price? See, that's a scarcity mindset." Logan shot back, now fully engaged in his performance. He leaned forward, mimicking Jax's posture, but his was an imitation born of arrogance, not curiosity. "It's about winning, about being the best. I just don't see how celebrating a weakness, a limp, fits into a winning mindset. It's a bit tragic, don't you think?" The word tragic hung in the air, a poison dart. The studio audience, which had been restless, now fell into a tense, uncomfortable silence. The crew in the control booth exchanged worried glances. This was veering from edgy television into something ugly and cruel. Stallone remained silent, his body a coiled spring. He wasn't looking at Jax or the sergeant anymore. His gaze was locked on Logan Vance, a look of profound, unnerving stillness. His hands, which had been resting loosely on his knees, were now gripping the plush arms of the chair. The tension was no longer a subtle undercurrent. It was a physical presence in the room, thick and suffocating. The jovial atmosphere of late-night live had completely evaporated, replaced by the stark, sterile feeling of an operating theater where something was about to be surgically and painfully excised. The host, Jax Ryder, began to realize his calculated instigation had unleashed something he might not be able to control. His smile became fixed, a mask of professional composure that didn't quite reach his panicked eyes. He tried to interject, to pivot, but Logan Vance, high on his own perceived dominance, saw only a captive audience. He was determined to land his killing blow. He turned his body more fully towards Sergeant McDonald, who sat with a quiet, wounded dignity that seemed to infuriate the young influencer even more. "Look, I get it. You did your thing. You served. Rah, rah, rah," Logan said, waving a dismissive hand. "But let's be real. In the culture now, it's about the image. It's about power. And that walk." He paused for effect, a cruel, theatrical beat. Then he did the unthinkable. He subtly, yet unmistakably, mimicked the sergeant's limp as he shifted his weight in the expensive designer chair, a grotesque little pantomime of another man's pain. It's not exactly the walk of a conqueror, is it? More like a broken toy. An audible gasp swept through the audience. It was a collective intake of breath, a unified sound of shock and disgust. Sergeant MacDonald's face, which had remained a stoic mask, finally broke. A flicker of deep, personal hurt crossed his features before he regained his composure, setting his jaw and staring straight ahead at the cameras, as if looking past his tormentor and into the void. This was the moment the confrontation became irreversible. It was no longer about a clash of philosophies. It was a brazen, personal, and deeply cruel attack on a man's honor. In that instant, Sylvester Stallone moved. He didn't erupt. He didn't shout. The power of his response was in its control. He leaned forward, not aggressively, but with an immense, gravitational weight that seemed to suck all the air out of the studio. His voice, when he finally spoke, was preternaturally calm, a low rumble that cut through the shocked silence like a blade. "Excuse me," he said, the two words delivered with chilling precision. He wasn't addressing Jax. He wasn't addressing the audience. His eyes were fixed on Logan Vance, and they held an expression of cold, righteous fury that a generation of moviegoers had only ever seen on a cinema screen. "What did you just say to this man?" It wasn't a question seeking information. It was a demand. It was a line drawn in the sand. The entire power dynamic of the show, of the room, of the entire media event was now balanced on the point of that question. Logan Vance, for the first time, seemed to sense that the ground beneath his feet was not as solid as he had believed. The breaking point arrived not with a roar, but with the chilling quiet that precedes a lightning strike. Logan Vance, caught in the unblinking stare of Sylvester Stallone, faltered. His entire persona was built on a foundation of unearned confidence, and that foundation was now cracking under a pressure it was never designed to withstand. He tried to deflect, to summon his usual armor of sarcasm. "Whoa, take it easy, Rocky," he stammered, attempting a smirk that looked more like a grimace. "It's just banter. We're just talking. The guy's a hero, I get it, but he's not made of porcelain. It's the entertainment business, right? A little edge. The appeal to entertainment, to the shallow, manufactured reality he inhabited, was his final, fatal miscalculation. For Stallone, this had transcended entertainment. It had become a matter of fundamental principle. The final straw was not the insult itself, but the cavalier justification for it, the idea that human dignity was a currency to be traded for ratings and shock value. Stallone didn't respond immediately. Instead, he held the silence, letting it stretch into an eternity of discomfort for Logan and Jax. The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the lights. He slowly, deliberately, turned his entire body on the couch to face Logan Vance directly. It was a physical manifestation of a moral realignment, a complete disengagement from the pretense of the show to address the core of the rot. The cameras, sensing the monumental nature of the moment, zoomed in, creating a tight two-shot of the aging lion and the corner jackal. Stallone looked at Logan. Then his gaze shifted to Sergeant MacDonald, a look of profound respect and apology passing between them. Then his eyes returned to Logan, and the cold fury had been replaced by something far more devastating, a look of deep, profound pity and contempt. The air crackled. The audience held its breath, a collective witness to a public reckoning. This was no longer a talk show. It was a courtroom, and judgment was about to be rendered. The host was powerless. The crowd was a jury, and a man who had built a career playing heroes was about to become one in the most authentic way imaginable, without a script, without a stunt double, armed only with the weight of his own character. The climax was here, poised and ready to strike with the force of an anvil. Sylvester Stallone, now the undeniable center of gravity in the room, finally broke the suffocating silence. His voice was not loud, but it carried an authority that filled every corner of the vast studio, a tone forged from experience, conviction, and righteous anger. He looked directly into Logan Vance's wide, panicked eyes. "That broken toy comment," Stallone began, his voice a low, gravelly current of power. That winner's walk you know so much about. He paused, letting the influencer's own words hang in the air like a death sentence. Let me explain something to you about winning. He gestured with an open hand towards Sergeant McDonald. That limp you find so amusing? He got that running towards a gunfire that gives you the freedom to sit here on this couch and spew your ignorant garbage on television. The words landed like body blows. Logan flinched visibly, his face flushing a deep, blotchy red. The audience was utterly silent, hanging on every syllable. Stallone wasn't finished. He was now dismantling Logan's entire worldview, piece by pathetic piece. That limp isn't a sign of weakness, kid. It's a receipt. It's proof of payment for a debt you don't even know you owe. It is a medal of honor that he will wear for the rest of his life. It has more character, more integrity, and more strength in it than your entire vapid existence. The condemnation was absolute. The moral high ground had not just been seized. It had been fortified into an unassailable fortress. Stallone now turned his gaze, for a brief, withering moment, to Jack's rider. "And you," he said, his voice dripping with disappointment, "you let this happen. For a soundbite? For a viral clip?" Jax shrank back in his chair, his host's mask completely shattered, revealing the flustered, craven showman beneath. Stallone turned back to Logan, his voice softening slightly, but losing none of its intensity. It was the sound of a man delivering a final, brutal lesson. Your influence is a flicker. It's a trend that will be forgotten by next season. His sacrifice is history. It's etched into the foundation of the liberty you take for granted. You build your brand by tearing people down. He helped build a nation's security by holding the line. So let me ask you, Stallone concluded, his voice dropping to an almost whisper that was somehow louder than a shout. You look at this man, and you look at yourself. Who's the broken one here? The question was rhetorical, but it echoed with the force of a verdict. The power dynamic was not just shifted, it was annihilated. Logan Vance was no longer an antagonist. He was a spectacle of public humiliation, stripped bare of his arrogance, exposed for all to see. Having delivered his devastating moral verdict, Stallone made it clear that his participation in the charade was over. There was no room for negotiation, no possibility of a smooth recovery orchestrated by the now panicked host. He had said what needed to be said, and now his actions would speak with the same deafening clarity as his words. He turned away from the shell-shocked Logan Vance, his dismissal so complete it was as if the influencer had ceased to exist. He looked at Jack's rider, not with anger anymore, but with a profound and final disappointment. "Jax," he said, his voice firm and resolute, "I'm sorry, but my time is more valuable than this. I cannot, in good conscience, be a part of a platform that mistakes cruelty for entertainment and disrespects the very people who guarantee our freedoms." His statement was a direct indictment of the show and its ethos. He then turned his full attention to Sergeant Major McDonald. The contrast in his demeanor was stark and moving. The hardness in his face melted away, replaced by a look of genuine warmth and solidarity. He extended his large hand, and the sergeant, looking up with a mixture of surprise and gratitude, took it. Stallone gripped his hand firmly, a handshake that was more than a pleasantry. It was a pact of respect. "Sir," Stallone said, his voice resonating with sincerity, "it was a true honor to share this stage with you. Thank you for everything you've done." With that, he released the sergeant's hand and stood up. The movement was deliberate, unhurried, and powerful. With the entire studio watching in stunned silence, he reached for the small microphone clipped to his lapel. He unfastened it with a careful, almost surgical precision and placed it gently on the polished surface of the low coffee table between the guest chairs. The small, metallic click of the microphone hitting the table was the only sound in the cavernous room, a punctuation mark on his definitive withdrawal. He gave one final, brief nod to the sergeant, ignored Logan and Jax completely, and turned his back on the set. Without a single look back, Sylvester Stallone walked off the stage, disappearing into the wings from which he had emerged an hour and a lifetime ago. His exit was not an act of retreat. It was an act of ultimate victory a declaration that some things, dignity, honor, and respect, are not up for debate. The moment Stallone vanished from the stage, an eerie, profound silence descended upon the studio. It was a vacuum, left by the sudden departure of immense moral authority. The hot lights hummed. The cameras remained trained on the scene of the carnage, but the life force of the show had walked out the door. Jack's Ryder sat frozen in his host's chair, his face a canvas of disbelief and dawning horror. His show, his carefully controlled universe, had just imploded on live television, and he was the one left sitting in the wreckage. His eyes darted from the empty space where Stallone had been to the trembling figure of Logan Vance, to the teleprompter that now offered him no useful words, no escape route. Logan himself seemed to shrink under the glare of the lights. The smug, arrogant persona had been sandblasted away, leaving behind a pale, terrified young man, exposed and utterly humiliated. He stared at his hands, unable to meet the gaze of anyone, least of all the man he had mocked. Then, from the hushed darkness of the audience, a new sound emerged. It started with a single person, a woman in the third row, who slowly got to her feet and began to clap. Her applause was not the polite, rhythmic clap of a studio audience. It was a defiant, heartfelt ovation. A man next to her joined in, then another and another. Within seconds, a wave of motion swept through the theater as the entire audience rose to its feet. The applause grew into a thunderous, sustained roar. But this standing ovation was not for the show. It was for the man who had just walked off of it. It was for his integrity, his courage. And it was for Sergeant Major McDonald, who remained seated on the couch, a solitary figure of dignity amidst the chaos. He looked out at the sea of applauding faces, and for the first time that night, his stoic composure wavered. His eyes glistened with unshed tears, a look of overwhelming gratitude and vindication on his face. The cameras, now scrambling, panned across the standing, cheering crowd, then cut to a wide shot of the disastrous scene on stage. The flustered host, the disgraced influencer, and the honored soldier, all under the roar of a public verdict. In the control room, chaos reigned. A frantic producer, headset askew, was shouting orders that no one could follow. Cut to commercial. Give me a graphic. Go to black, just go to black. The screen at home flickered abruptly, replaced by a pre-recorded car commercial. The jarring transition from raw human drama to slick consumerism only highlighting the magnitude of the preceding implosion. The emergency commercial break was a flimsy dam against the tidal wave. Before the last car had even driven off the screen in the advertisement, the internet had erupted. Cell phone footage, shot from a dozen different angles in the audience, was already rocketing across social media platforms. The shaky, raw clips captured the whole horrifying and inspiring sequence. Logan's sneer, Stallone's steely intervention, the devastating monologue, the mic drop, the walk-off, and the audience's explosive standing ovation. The incident didn't just go viral. It became a global phenomenon in a matter of minutes. Hashtags began to trend worldwide. Hashtag Stallone stands, hashtag respect the hero, and hashtag Jack Ryder Meltdown dominated Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. The initial clips were quickly followed by a torrent of commentary. Media outlets, from legacy news organizations to online blogs, scrambled to publish articles, their headlines screaming about the explosive confrontation and Stallone's heroic stand. Military and veterans organizations issued powerful statements, praising Stallone for his unwavering defense of one of their own and condemning the disgraceful behavior witnessed on Late Night Live. The fallout for Logan Vance was immediate and catastrophic. His carefully curated image of being an edgy provocateur was shattered, replaced by the reality of being a cruel, entitled bully. His comment sections, usually a curated space of fawning praise, became a raging inferno of public condemnation. Corporate sponsors, who had paid handsomely to attach their brands to his influence, began to panic. By morning, 3 of his largest partners had issued statements terminating their contracts, citing a misalignment of values. Logan, in a desperate act of damage control, posted a hastily shot apology video from what looked like a hotel room. His tearful, rambling plea for forgiveness, filled with excuses about the pressure and not being himself, was widely panned as insincere and self-serving. It only fueled the fire, becoming a meme for fake contrition. The public had rendered its verdict, and it was swift and merciless. Sylvester Stallone was hailed as a hero of a different kind, a man of character in an industry often devoid of it. Logan Vance was the villain, a cautionary tale for the digital age. The confrontation on a late-night talk show had become a defining cultural referendum on decency itself. In the weeks and months that followed, the consequences of that single, explosive night solidified into lasting legacies for all involved. Sylvester Stallone's reputation, already formidable, was elevated to a new level. He was no longer just a movie star. He was viewed as a genuine figure of integrity, a man whose real-life character mirrored the heroic archetypes he so often portrayed. He never spoke of the incident publicly again. He didn't need to. His silence was more powerful than any interview or press release, a testament to his belief that his actions on that stage were self-explanatory. His quiet dignity in the aftermath only enhanced the public's admiration. For Sergeant Major Thomas McDonald, the encounter was life-altering. The charity he was there to represent, Veterans First, was inundated with an unprecedented flood of donations. The viral moment had accomplished more in one night than a year of fundraising campaigns could have hoped for. Mac himself became a reluctant but powerful public figure, a symbol of quiet strength and resilience. He handled his newfound fame with the same humility and grace he had displayed on Ryder's couch, always redirecting the attention back to the cause of his fellow veterans. He and Stallone reportedly struck up a private friendship, united by a moment of shared principle. The fallout for Logan Vance was a brutal lesson in the fickle nature of fame built on a foundation of sand. His career as a top-tier influencer was effectively over. He lost his sponsorships, his agency dropped him, and his follower count, once his most prized metric, began a steady, irreversible decline. He became a pariah, a punchline in the very culture he had once sought to dominate. He was a stark and enduring cautionary tale about the chasm between having a platform and having a purpose, between being an influencer and having a positive influence. Jack Ryder's show, Late Night Live, also suffered. Ratings dipped as viewers, disillusioned by his role in orchestrating the cruel spectacle, tuned out. He was forced to issue a lengthy, on-air apology, but the damage was done. The show's brand of edgy irreverence now seemed cheap and toxic. The incident sparked a much broader and necessary public conversation about media ethics, the responsibilities of those with a platform, and the corrosive nature of a culture that often prizes shock value over substance. The ultimate moral of the story was clear and resonant. True strength is not measured in physical perfection, social media followers, or television ratings. It is measured in character, in the courage to defend the vulnerable, and in the quiet integrity to stand for what is right, even if it means walking away. The limp of a war hero, once mocked as a weakness, had become a national symbol of honor, all because one man had the courage to say what everyone was thinking, and in doing so, reminded a world watching what true strength really looks like.